are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today we have an amazing show lineup for y'all today, just like always. And we have a special guest, Joel Bouchard. He is amazing, awesome guy that we're going to talk to. He is someone that we're going to learn about from his military background. He was in the Army. He's an Army veteran. He's also a business leader. He is also an author, a painter, a record producer. He is doing great things, man. He also has a show himself, is From Nowhere to Nothing. But first and foremost, Joel, thanks for taking time. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
So, man, I appreciate you taking time. So I'm going to let you have the floor. Kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself. How did you find yourself joining the Army? And thank you for your service, by the way. And we'll kind of dive into everything else later.
So, the Army, I joined a little bit later in life. As a kid, I went to community college, and I always had a passion for learning, wanted to move on. But I also have a passion for financial responsibility. So when I looked at how much it was going to cost to continue my education, I said, oh man, I can't afford that. And I didn't want to take out student loans. So I joined the Army, which was also something, that I'd always thought about, since I had been a kid. And, it was an interesting experience. I think my grandpa, who was also in the Army, kind of summed it up. He said, being in the Army it's a $1 million experience that I wouldn't pay a wooden nickel to repeat, right? There's a lot of things that you learn and a lot of things that are important and that are good. But it's hard, it's a hard career path. And, you meet a lot of challenges along the way that make you a better person. So
is your grandfather also a co-host with you on your podcast, or is that someone else I see in the picture?
Yeah, so no, that's my philosophy professor from when I was in community college, Norm Gayford. He's the one who kind of got me excited about philosophy. Up until that point, I wasn't really sure what it was all about, whether it was just dusty books and old guys with beards being angry at the world, but I found that it's about a lot more than that.
As far as like how he taught, because I'm sure like that probably played a role, right, for you to launching a podcast together. What was his style of teaching, and how did that drew you in to say, you know what, we should really have a conversation with this on the microphone?
Yeah. I think that what puts off a lot of people with school is, lesson plans. I think that a lot of teachers start out with a plan. They go, okay, well, I'm going to hit these bullet points no matter what, and then that'll be it. Whereas Norm was really the kind of guy where, he'd broach a topic at the beginning of class, he'd give an overview, or he'd talk about what we had been reading about that week. But then as people brought up their thoughts on it, he just kind of stood back and let the class talk about it. And so we'd talk for, depending on the class, an hour, sometimes more, about what we had read. And a lot of interesting ideas developed that way. And where I really got to know him is after the class ended, I had some dead space between my next class. And so he'd hang out afterwards, and him and I would just talk about, various things that had come up during the philosophy class, and really got to know each other well that way. And then down the road, that's why I thought, the main purpose of the show is trying to recreate some of those discussions that we had, but on air, so that other people can kind of enjoy listening to him.
Yeah, I'm sure y'all went over Socrates and all that, know thyself. When it comes to just exploring how different philosophers look at life, do you have someone that you kind of like draw close to as far as like favorite quotes or favorite, perspectives? And if so, who?
I don't know. That's a difficult question because, I think that different philosophers excel in different things, especially when it comes to their specifics like aesthetics and stuff, or morality. Each philosopher kind of has their own different take on it. And rather than being able to fully embrace any one, you kind of got to look at it critically and kind of take pieces from everybody and sort of put together something that you believe as an individual. But I think that, somebody who, it seems like everything I read about him, I tend to resonate with it a little bit, is Immanuel Kant. There's definitely some things where I go, I would have gone a different direction. But by and large, I think that he does a good job of kind of marrying sort of scientific empiricism, but also rationalism. This idea that science will never be able to answer all of our questions and we need something comes in.
Once again, you listen to Refocus Radio, talking to our awesome guest today, Joel Bouchard, and he is one of the co-hosts of the amazing podcast From Nowhere to Nothing. And we're talking about philosophy, we're talking about military, we're talking about everything. You are also into music. So as a person who plays multiple instruments and as a record producer, how did you get into the creative space? Because you have this structure in leadership with military and you have education with school. How did you get involved into the music arts?
Yeah, so when I was, I didn't listen to much music growing up. I didn't play any instruments. And when I was 14, my friends and I decided we were going to start a band, and none of us played anything. So they said, "Why don't you play guitar?" I said, "Okay." And we had a band for a few years. It was a lot of fun. My drummer ended up getting married. My bass player moved out of state to go to college. But I really wanted to keep playing music. So when I was 19, I went to Guitar Center and spent my life savings buying a bunch of recording equipment and instruments, and just taught myself how to play them and build a studio, computer, and distributed the stuff myself. So here we are.
Now, did you turn this into a business eventually too? Did you start producing for other people, like mixing or recording or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done a little bit. For the most part, I try to keep my creative stuff separate. I don't advertise on my podcast or anything. I don't go out of my way to try to commercialize things too much, because I like keeping the creativity of it, kind of pure in some sense.
No, that makes sense. Now, did anybody that you were playing with, because you mentioned a band, did they also did they serve too, or how did you keep tabs with them when they moved on from the band?
Yeah, they were all childhood friends, and there's one of them that I don't know what he's doing. There's another one that I'm still good friends with. He's one of the most deeply philosophical people I've ever met. But he owns his own business, building timber framing, kind of log cabins for really rich people, that sort of stuff. We keep in touch in a lot of different ways. But
once again, listen to Refocus Radio, talking to Joel Bouchard, and man, we are just talking about all the different things, different pieces, different periods of your life. So when you are working on music, what is your process like? Do you just listen to others to be inspired? Do you eat food? Because I heard people say, well, I eat a good, blah, blah, blah meal, and that inspires me to have the creative juices going. What's the process look like for you anytime you're in a creative mood?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that I'm a lot different from most musicians. When I'm getting ready to write an album, I stop listening to music altogether. And usually I'll write very fast. So whereas a lot of people will sort of collect songs over time, usually I'll sit down and over the course of 10 days, write 10 songs and, mix them real quick and put them out. So it's very fast moving. I like to sort of imagine that I'm in the state of being, a famous musician, right? And thinking, well, what would a famous drummer do here? What would a famous bass player do here? What would a famous guitarist do here? Rather than just thinking of things from my perspective, I try to think of it from the various instrument perspectives in order to not have music that sounds like it's made by one guy, but have music that sounds like it's done by a band.
That's very smart. I think that's pretty cool. So it's like, okay, well, what would so and so do? From this band or whatever. How would they play this solo or play this chord progression? When you get ready to push music, do you just kind of let it out and see who comes your way to listen, or do you put a little bit of marketing into promoting your projects?
Yeah, no, I pretty much just put it out there and see what happens. Like I said, I'm not out to make money off of my creative stuff so much. Most of the time I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. And then, since I have the ability to record stuff, I put it out there to see if other people will. But I try not to get too hung up on pushing stuff because, sometimes if you get too involved with it, the negative influences of people might kind of hinder the way you approach things some, or even the positive aspects of it. If you start making a lot of money and then you start thinking of it as your job rather than your hobby, it can affect the way that you interact with it.
That's a good point. Because I think it's like you can get too involved to where you just lose your taste of who you really are as a creative versus, you got to please everybody because now everybody has an opinion about what you're making.
Yeah, exactly. If those people are paying your paycheck, then you're going to want to do something that makes them happy instead of something that you think is cool,
Yeah. Now, going back to your podcast that you produce and that you co-host, From Nowhere to Nothing, it's very different. I listened to some episodes. It's very unique. Only way I can explain is like it's just free. It's like free for all. Like it's almost like you enter a dark room. It's like boom, whatever topic comes, we're covering that, and we just explore that until the end of the show. Kind of explain your style with your podcasting because I think it is unique.
Yeah. I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like I said earlier, the whole impetus of the show is just to try to recreate those conversations that me and my professor had after class, right? About whatever topic we had been looking at. So, with the show, what we do is we take, just a word or two words, and we spend a whole hour trying to figure out what that thing means. So we'll look at formative aspects of it, kind of historically what philosophers have thought about it. We'll try to determine the essence of it ourselves, try to figure out what it means, and then we'll try to ask some speculative questions about what it means for the human race or for the human experience to engage with this thing. And we don't always get there. Like you said, we're very free. So sometimes we get totally derailed and we go around in circles or we jump from thing to thing. But by and large, that's what we're trying to accomplish.
I mean, y'all even touch on the hot button right now, and that is artificial intelligence. When it comes to AI and the whole Chat GPT, and Google has Bard or whatever it's called. What's your opinion on how much is too much or too little while using AI technology?
Yeah, like you said, we've delved into that quite a bit, and what you find is that there's some facade to it where this kind of mythic power that culture gives to it doesn't really exist below the surface. But at the same time, that isn't to say that it doesn't have far-reaching impacts that can affect us on a deep level. And I think that those levels are the way that we interact with information. The internet was able to do that, and then social media was able to do that, and AI is going to also do that. So where it's sourcing information and how it's presenting it are going to be very important things for ethicists to consider as they kind of move forward in its development.
When you look at your military background and you being a creative artist yourself, is there a balance that you use day to day in as far as like how you structure your life, your daily routine? Or are you at the point where it's like, okay, I know what I can do, what I can't do. I'm going to just be free and enjoy my life on my terms?
Yeah, that's a fun question, right? Because I think that when I look at myself, I see a lot of order and I see a lot of chaos or, unstructure. And what I've kind of found the key to it is you want to institute structure in ways that help you. So I remember hearing one time Steve Jobs saying that he only owned black turtlenecks, right? Because then he didn't have to pick what clothes he was wearing in the morning. So that makes sense to me, right? I have 3 colors worth of t-shirts, so I never have to think about what clothes I'm going to wear. And that's a way that structure can help you, right? If you can kind of automatize some of the basic things in everyday life and make some of that stuff automatic, and just so you don't have to spend mental energy on it, then that opens you up to have a lot more time than you would think to pursue hobbies. I just finished another album. I'm about to finish writing a novel. I do the podcast on a weekly basis. And, I still have friends and family and, a career and these other things that I engage with. And I think that can largely be chalked up to, making some choices automatic, being able to work out and get up and eat and dress myself in such a way that is structured.
It's funny you say that because I had an interview with a doctor who talked about neuroscience, and she had a book on baby senses, basically talking about how we interact with our environment and how some of these interactions can kind of like be building blocks of how we structure our lives. So like one interaction when we're young can make us want to, be a football player or a doctor or whatever. Like all these little experiences kind of guides us into what we like and don't like and choose our path in our career. When you look at your life, did you have anything when you were younger that you experienced that kind of pushed you in one direction versus the other?
Yeah, I think so. What I like to tell people as a PhD student is that, I've gotten straight A's my whole life, except I failed preschool, right? I had to do preschool twice because I'm not very social. I'm an introvert by nature. So as a kid, I got through the end of the year and the teacher said, listen, he seems to be smart, but he didn't say a single word to anybody the whole time. So They made me do it again. And then I continued to have some struggles just with normal interactions with kids. And my mom decided to homeschool me for the first part of my, the first few grades. And I think that really is what kind of set me on a good course, because my mom, despite not being a super highly educated lady, she knew how to capture my attention, my curiosity, my creativity, right? She'd take me to the museum, and rather than saying it's going to be an educational learning experience, right? She'd say, hey, look at this this dinosaur skeleton. How cool is this, right? And you go, oh yeah. And then before you know it, you're reading all the placards on every single exhibit.
Right.
And then just kind of expanding the boundaries of school beyond the classroom to everyday life. And now all of a sudden, you're finding things to put under the microscope, and you're finding things all of life suddenly seems like this very interesting thing that you want to know more about, rather than it just being 8 hours during the day where you go and you sit in a class and you learn something because you have to.
That's a great concept. Like, your mom is on to something. I'm sure they are doing something like that with today's youth. They're making things a little bit more funner than I don't remember having no iPads and all that stuff when I was going to school. It was all old school with the, notebook and the pencil, and we had to write in cursive. So I don't know if they even do that anymore nowadays. But when you look at the structure of school and how your mom treated opportunities for you to learn something new, did you kind of approach school the way your mom did, like later in life, like in a fun way? Like, okay, how can I make this not boring but more interesting?
Yeah. I think that's still what I'm doing to this day. I think that is the thing that sort of set me up to be the person that I am in a lot of ways. And that sort of thing does have to be tempered, right? Because I knew other kids that were homeschooled that didn't turn out well. And I think that the positive and the negative of homeschool is determined by the teacher, right? You have to have somebody who, has a love of learning themselves and knows how much they know and how much they don't know, right? My mom, once we got into higher up, she knew that, okay, well, I don't know all this math, so I'm going to have to hire a tutor. I'm going to have to send them here, there, the other thing. So, I think that it's a very tricky thing, homeschooling, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. But I think that, with the proper encouragement, it can definitely help shape minds in a way that it's hard to do in a classroom when you have 25 kids instead of just one that you're teaching,
And speaking of that, when you look at leadership, because from military to education and structuring your life day in, day out, how do you take that initiative to say, okay, I'm plateauing, I need to make these adjustments so that I don't settle in life?
I think the important thing is to always be doing something new, because when you're doing something new, you're failing. You're failing at things, and you're struggling with things, and you're trying to figure things out. And that little bit of failure and struggle is enough to open your eyes in areas that maybe you are really good at, right? I've been playing music for a long time now. And so it's easy to get into a rut of thinking, oh, okay, well, this is just where I'm at. But if I'm struggling in a different part of my life with something new, that experience is enough to transfer over to my music to go, oh, you know what? I should try something different here. I learned something by failing over here. I learned something in this struggle that crosses over and will help me be more creative in this other endeavor. So I think that, never resting on your laurels, always trying something new is a good way of helping you in any aspect of your life. It's sort of a humbling experience that crosses over to everything else.
Once again, listen, I'll Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Joel Bouchard, and his podcast that you can go listen to right now it's called From Nowhere to Nothing. Real quick, two last things I want to touch on. Earlier I said that you also are author and painter. Tell us a little bit about your authorship and also some of the painting that you do.
Yeah. So painting, I am a little bit strange. I tend to use knives, painting knives versus brushes, although I have gotten into brushes a bit recently. I like to stick with landscapes. Usually I'm painting places that I've visited on vacation and that sort of thing. Writing, I write novels as well as works of philosophy. So I'm just finishing up, literally, I've got one more day of writing my novel that I'm hoping will probably be out a year from now, called The Sleeper, the Scholar, and the Strix. I'm real excited about it. It's the first novel that I've actually gotten to completion, and reading through it as a whole, I was pleasantly surprised that it's better than I thought it was. Sometimes you go to do a creative thing, whether it's writing a song or a book or whatever, and after you're done, you go, this kind of sucks. But in this case, I read through and I go, oh man, you know what? This is better than I thought it was when I was writing it. So,
and people can find your podcast From Nowhere to Nothing on Podbean. But are you on any other website or social media where they can find out when the book will release?
Yeah, if they, From Nowhere to Nothing, we have our own Facebook page, so you can find us there.
Gotcha.
That's probably the best way to communicate with us. We do have an email address if anybody wants to. We're always open to people sending us suggestions for topic ideas, or if you just want to get in touch with me to talk about some other things. But it's just From Nowhere to Nothing podcast @gmail.com. It's kind of lengthy, but it's straightforward.
Once again, listen, on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest today, Joel Bouchard. You can check out the podcast From Nowhere to Nothing. Check out his music too. Real quick, before we close, how can people listen to your tracks and where can they find them?
Yeah, so they can find them pretty much anywhere you listen to music. Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere. The newest album is All We Are, but there's several other projects I got up there.
Well, this is a great example of what your podcast experience is like. Like I said, it's like walking in a dark room, pick a topic, and just go with it. And I think that is so cool because it's not easy to do. It's truly an art. And for those listening, and they are building their, creative space or the podcast, what encouragement would you say to people out there who are continuously trying to build what they have and go to that next level?
Yeah, I think that it follows on the thread of kind of what I've been saying throughout the episode, which is that you have to avoid the temptation to become frustrated and avoid the temptation to become disappointed, right? Anytime somebody learns something new, they're going to fail, they're going to struggle. And you can either look at that as something negative, or you can look at it as a learning experience and start to develop it into something positive, and eventually even come to enjoy the experience of struggling and learning and failing in a way that will help you boost your abilities later down the road.
And once again, it's been a great conversation. Talk to our guest today, Joel Bouchard, here on Refocus Radio. Make sure you go check out his work on Spotify and also the podcast you can find on Podbean. It's From Nowhere to Nothing. I'm sure it's everywhere like Amazon Music and Spotify as well. Once again, man, I'll let you have a call to action. What do you want to say for the audience to continue support?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not real commercial with my stuff, but if you want to check things out, I always appreciate the fact that people are willing to listen to my music, listen to my podcast, and I appreciate any continued support.
Once again, talking to Joel Bouchard here on Refocus Radio, man. Thank you for your time, man.
Thanks for having me on.